Greetings, Sentinels fans! As of recording, Desperation has finally been shipped to backers, and I have received my copy. So I feel it might be a good time to roll the hype train a bit and discuss the changes to Visionary. Visionary occupies an interesting spot in this card game. In Enhanced Edition, she was one of the 10 heroes in the core game, but now she is a character in the second definitive expansion. She was also one of the characters with the biggest need for a deck revision. This was less an issue of her own deck design and more an issue of the game around her climbing the power curve. Her Enhanced Edition deck is a lot of situational cards interspersed with a couple of general use effects, though she is mostly known for moving cards around, particularly card draws for heroes and reordering villain cards. Her Definitive Edition version has similar purposes, but has one rather extreme addition: her Dark Side deck. Yes, Vanessa Long is the first hero to get a side deck, and it is devoted to her evil half. That's not to say that they are negative cards, they will still help, but they can also be a hindrance to the heroes or very self-centered. Now the side deck makes it so Visionary has 10 more cards than any other hero, which of course means more work for me, so enough dilly-dallying. Starting off with the only card that didn't make the transition. Foresight is a card that allowed Visionary to move through her own deck looking for cards. It was a power, she peeked at 3 cards, put one of them back in her hand and one on the bottom of her deck. In general, it wasn't really all that much better than her base power anyways. Overall, kind of okay, but not very exciting. Now I don't really have a plan for the comparisons, so we will start with her Enhanced Edition setup cards. Let's begin with Decoy Projection. Both versions of this card essentially act as a meat shield for our psychic friend. Both have 6 hit points, and both can take hits for Visionary, though this redirect is automatic in Enhanced Edition, while it is choice in Definitive, though it won't redirect if that damage is psychic, for self-harm reasons. Yeah, you'll note later that Visionary deals herself a lot of psychic damage, so this is probably to go around that. Definitive Projection also has an additional benefit of dealing a bit of damage on a few bad guys upon its destruction. Another fun thing to note is that they both have different additional keywords. Enhanced Projection has a distortion keyword, causing it to interact with the Realm of Discord's field effects, wherein when one shows up, it will blow up the projection too. However, Definitive's version has the manifestation keyword. Now I thought this would interact with the Dreamer's deck, but no, that deck uses Nightmare cards. The deck that uses the manifestation keyword was Infinitor's Enhanced Edition deck. Now, as Infinitor doesn't exist in Definitive Edition yet, we don't know if he will still have the manifestation keyword. Lore-wise, it seems like a random interaction since there is no direct connection between the two, but weird stuff like this can happen in the card game. Looking at more defense, we have Telekinetic Cocoon. In Enhanced Edition, this card was honestly pretty broken. It made Visionary immune to damage at the cost of preventing her from playing cards or using powers. This put her out of range for attacks potentially indefinitely. This would make her a good shield for single attacks, or give her an opportunity to draw cards, and as long as you don't let the card blow up at the start of your turn, or the villain doesn't have ongoing destruction, you'll be safe for the whole game. Definitive Cocoon changes this though. First, it's no longer an ongoing card. It's another manifestation with 6 hit points. So villains can use damage to break through the shields, but otherwise can't get the Visionary. Second, the Cocoon will destroy itself at the start of her next turn, no choice given, though she does gain 2 hit points and draws a card. Lastly, when the Cocoon is destroyed, whether by damage or self-destruction, the top card of the Dark Side deck is played, giving a powerful effect but potentially hurting yourself or your team. I am on board with the changes, as it puts it more in line with the big stalling tactics that other heroes can do, instead of turtling up indefinitely. Let's move to Prophetic Vision. In Enhanced Edition, this was a one-shot that looked at the top 3 cards of the Environment deck. One was placed on top, while the other 2 were placed on the bottom of the deck. In DE, it is now an ongoing card that gives a power where you reveal 3 cards of the villain deck, and select 1 to discard, 1 to replace, and 1 to play. Then you do the same thing with Visionary's own deck. Bit of a high-risk, high-reward kind of play, which I guess fits the new Visionary to a T. But if you don't want to use a power, you still get a benefit. At the end of your turn, you can either use a power or draw a card. So while the villain card play might stop me from using the power too much, this card will still hit the table. And since we did Prophetic Vision, let's look at its EE companion, Precognition. This one essentially did what Prophetic Vision did, but with the villain deck. Look at the top 3 cards, 1 on top, 2 on the bottom. DE's has a similar deal. It gives you the power where you can look at the top 3 cards of any one deck and put them back in any order. You then have the option to discard the top card of the deck to get rid of a card you don't like, as long as you play a card from the dark side deck. This does seem to take over the role of both the old cards, by being able to look at any deck and peel off cards you don't like. I'm conflicted about making this into a power, as I'm sure a lot of you know how I feel about Enhanced Dark Visionary. But again, DE's use of Discover effects does mitigate the effectiveness of deck manipulation, so maybe the change is okay. Let's keep going with ongoing cards. This time with Mass Levitation. Both of these cards are defensive but accomplish it differently. Enhanced Editions gave Viz a power to reduce damage dealt by environment cards by 3 until her next turn. This can unfortunately be fairly niche, as the threat from the environment isn't always from slinging damage around. Sometimes it's increasing damage, making characters damage themselves, or putting more cards on the field. Even if this was helpful though, there are usually better ways available to the heroes for mitigating the environment than having to spend a power use every turn that can be better spent on other things. DE's Levitation instead reduces damage heroes receive by 2 until the card destroys itself on Visionary's next turn. After all, the heroes draw a card as a bonus. This makes Levitation join the likes of shielding winds or other stalling tactics, replacing a more niche defense with a more generally useful one. Next up is Mental Divergence. Enhanced version has a single power with 2 potential effects. First one lets you destroy an ongoing card. And do note, this is one of the few times in Enhanced Edition where ongoing destruction is given, but not environment destruction. The other effect is you can choose to take a hero ongoing card from a trash and put it on top of that hero's deck. This has the potential to be a rather busted effect as a power, since it can consistently bring back cards like Heroic Interception to use over and over again. DE's Divergence has a similar tack with its effects. First one lets you destroy an ongoing card, but with the additional gamble of playing a card from the dark side deck. The other effect would be to have Visionary collect an ongoing card but destroy Divergence. Both these effects making a more risky move to play this, but still quite useful. Next, we have Arrest the Mind. This one has Visionary take control of a bad guy for a little bit. The enhanced version attaches itself to a non-hero, non-character target. When that target would damage another, you can redirect the attack to a target of your choice. If you do this redirect, both Viz and the mind-controlled goon take 3 damage. But the target takes the damage first, so if the target is destroyed by this self-damage, Visionary doesn't need to take it. So that's nice. The card stays in play as long as the target is still around. This is great for villains with targets that attack people, but unhelpful for solo villains. But going to DE's version, I was surprised that this card was not in the dark side deck, since Mind Control is one of those superpowers that seems inherently evil, you know? Anyway, DE's Rest the Mind has a similar assist but different cost. Select one non-hero target, notably not restricted to non-character cards, and you can discard a card to redirect damage they deal. At the start of Visionary's next turn, she will either play a card from the dark side deck or deal herself a psychic damage, but either way, the card will blow up. I think the change for it being a temporary ongoing but allowing it to be placed on the main villain is a good trade-off. Next up, let's talk Demoralization. In EE, it's an ongoing that damages all enemies for 1 psychic damage at the start of all her turns. This could be used with Telekinetic Cocoon to make her invincible and always dealing damage, if you're okay with a very boring game. With Definitive Edition, we get to our very first Dark Side card. This is a one-shot that deals 1 psychic damage to each target, including heroes. Afterwards, you will either destroy every target with only 1 hit point, or 1 target with 6 or less, and choose carefully, because heroes and their allies can also be targeted by this destruction. Let's look at Brain Burn, a card that, in Enhanced Edition, takes all cards in the villain trash and puts them on the bottom of their deck, though this came at the cost of Visionary hitting herself hard. 1 damage for every card moved. This was an effect that had more use in the core game, as each villain had cards they can grab from the trash or gain benefit from having stuff in the trash. However, this effect became more niche with every new villain, and with the cost being really heavy, to the point where it eventually becomes a sacrifice play, you better have a good reason to use it. In Definitive Edition, it is another Dark Side card. It's a one-shot that buries up to 4 cards from either the top of the villain deck or the top of the villain trash. So no change in the orders of the trash, you guys. And then Viz will either draw 2 cards while forcing an ally to discard 2 cards, or she will deal both a hero and a non-hero for fixed psychic damage, spreading around the pain. Next, let's look at Twist the Ether. This was probably my favorite Enhanced Edition card. Play it and set it on any target you please. Whenever that target deals damage, you affect it in two ways. You can change the damage type to any type you like, and you can either increase or decrease the damage. This means you can set it on a hero to make them deal more damage, set it on a villain to make them deal less damage, and /or play around with damage type synergies, like messing with Absolute Zero's damage or getting protection with Raw. In definitive, the card is a Darkside card. Its main effect is the same as the enhanced version, though it now has a maintenance cost at the start of Visionary's turns, where she first deals herself 2 fixed psychic damage. Then she could choose to discard 2 cards or destroy this card. I will say, as Darkside cards go, this is probably one of the most positive, as the only downside is a maintenance cost for an effect that is purely useful in all situations, and no bullying your friends at all. We covered the old ongoings, so let's move to the old one-shots. Spoilers, let's do a 4th card that would get moved to the Darkside deck. Psychic Maelstrom in EE was a one-shot that dealt all non-hero targets 2 psychic damage. Not a huge thing, but good if you needed emergency damage to push a threat over the edge. The Darkside DE card brought it down a bit. Now it only deals 2 targets 2 psychic damage. However, it also hits everything for 1 fixed psychic damage, and again, heroes included. Now, onwards to Mind Spike, which in Enhanced Edition is as simple as they come. Pick 1 target and deal it 3 damage. Easy peasy. Well, in DE it's still 1 target and 3 damage, but the damage is now irreducible. And additionally, you may destroy an ongoing card in exchange for playing a Darkside card. Nice little upgrade. This next one is more a spiritual successor than a new version. Enhanced Edition had Cerebral Hemorrhage, which felt like a less beefed up version of Psychic Maelstrom, as it dealt 2 damage to up to 3 targets. Now there are cases where you may not want to hit absolutely everything, but it does seem like an odd choice to have 2 separate cards that do such similar things. The DE card that seems to take up the mantle here is Justify the Means. This card lets you choose up to 5 targets to get a 2-point migraine, but it also has an additional effect. You can choose to have Visionary deal herself 1 fixed psychic damage, and if you do, she deals everything else a psychic damage and plays a Darkside card. The title says it all, really. You have an arsenal of cards that bring more pain to the bad guys, but you're doing mean things in the process, whether to yourself or to your allies. On to another Enhanced Edition favorite, Suggestion. Play this one-shot and select 2 cards in the villain trash. Place 1 on top of the deck and 1 to bury. This is an excellent way to get a villain to repeat an action that isn't so bad, and you can fully expect. Also good for removing cards that villains benefit from having in the trash. In Definitive Edition, the effect is the same, but you can choose any deck. It's still probably best to choose the villain deck, but maybe they shuffle a lot, or the environment has its own problems. There is an additional effect on this one though. You can put 1 more card from that trash on its deck, though you will have to play the top card of the Darkside deck. You may be noticing a pattern of each regular card having a main effect as well as an extra effect in exchange for hitting the Darkside deck. But now we have reached the end of the Enhanced Edition cards, and now we will cover the new arrivals, starting with Memory Lapse, a card that can act as a counter to Discover effects. This ongoing card can activate when a non-hero deck attempts a Discover effect. Regardless of if it tries to find 1 card or several, you can destroy this card to prevent that Discover. Additionally, you get access to a power where your allies can discard a card and draw a card. Visionary can also choose to draw 2 cards, but then has to play for the Darkside deck. Now we will skim the surface, which allows Visionary to peek at the top card of 3 decks. Then she discards the top card of any 1 deck. Good for sniping a villain card you don't like, or simply churning through a hero's deck. After that, Visionary may choose to collect an ongoing or manifestation card from her deck in exchange for playing a Darkside card. Continuing to invade people's privacy, we have Psychic Intrusion. Visionary will deal 1 target 2 damage, and then she will peek at the top 3 cards of that target's deck. You may replace, discard, or bury them in any order, which does feel like another way the Vision cards have been modified. But now to show our hero losing some control, we have Begin to Fray. This card gives Visionary access to a reaction. When she is targeted for attack, she can take a point of damage to play a card, possibly blocking the hit depending on the play, or straight up playing a card from the dark side deck. Useful in an emergency, but can be costly. And before we go to the rest of the dark side, we must falter. Did you guys think this deck was going to avoid the threat of a Suddenly card? When this card enters Visionary's hand, it immediately enters play. Visionary will deal herself 1 psychic damage, draw 1 card, and play a dark side card. So a little threat in there for some pain and evil coming out. But hey, at least it gives you more draw to make up for the draw loss from the Suddenly. But now it is time to examine the other dark side cards. Our 6th dark side card is Forget What You Saw. This one discards the top card of each deck, and Visionary will hurt herself a bit for every target discarded. After that, she will either draw 3 cards, or discard 3 cards from the top of any deck. Whether that is worth it to you may be situational. 3 cards drawn is nice, but maybe not if you discard a card your friends might need, or something that helps the villain. But let's go to the Psych Snarl. Probably the only nod to the Dreamer's ability in the Visionary's deck. This is a target with 6 hit points that she will send after her foes. This is one card that moves around to different play areas, like the Diamond Manor Relics or Cosmic's Constructs. At the end phase of the area that the Snarl is in, Viz will deal herself a psychic damage and then move this card to another area. At the start phase of the play area that it's in, the Snarl will deal the lowest hit point target in that area, besides itself, 3 psychic damage. So it's a bit more damage, but Visionary will have to feed it her own mental health. And it can also be punched away. But let's talk about our fears, with Unrealized Phobia. This is a fancy one. Pick a non-character target in play. Pick a keyword on that card. Count how many targets in play have that keyword. One target will deal itself damage equal to that amount before Viz hits herself for 1. So this card could whiff entirely if there are no other targets on the field besides characters. It could be minor if there are only a couple of targets fitting a theme. Or it could be deadly if you got a lot of things on the field from the same theme. Say if you have half a dozen constructs or golems out. Or if there are a ton of werewolves against you and you can turn up the paranoia. So a bit of a gamble with this card. Playing with memories some more, Mental Erasure. Select a hero character. That hero's player must discard between 2 to 4 cards, their choice. For every card discarded, Visionary heals 2 points and deals 1 damage to 3 targets, and it is non-negotiable how many targets are hit, just like with the grenade launcher. So if you're dealing with a solo villain, your friends will be hit. This is one of those cases where Dark Visionary is benefiting herself exclusively at the expense of one of her allies. Next up, Mass Psychosis. This one has it so every target on the field with 6 or more hit points deals themselves 3 damage. So basically, everything except for minions most of the time. After that, Viz either plays a card from the environment deck or destroys an environment card. And to finish off the dark side deck, a card that will probably become one of those I like to end games with. Callous Disregard. On top of showing art of a pretty awesome moment where Dark Visionary just curb stomps Gloomweaver, it first forces every hero to discard a card. Then Viz may discard as many cards as you like. And then, you destroy a non-hero target with hit points less than or equal to the amount of cards discarded this turn. Granted, it could whiff if you don't have a significantly hurt main villain or any minions to nuke. But that's okay, because after that, she can either have every ally draw a card, or Viz will deal an extra point of hurting to the bad guys. You will see that the dark side deck isn't really that bad, and it has some powerful effects, even if some of them are niche. But they all have a cost. Forget has potential self-damage, Twist has self-damage and potential card discard, Maelstrom has either discards or team damage, Snarl has self-damage, Phobia has self-damage, Erasure has discards for another hero, Psychosis has team damage, Disregard also has team damage, Demoralize also has team damage, and Burn has either ally damage or discards. Viz has a lot of potential for self-damage, and while she does have defenses, not all of them are going to help her, as her fixed damage will bypass resistances, and her decoy doesn't protect her from psychic. She can protect herself with Cocoon and heal a little bit with it, but it is going to be paired with a dark side card, which will likely hurt her. But you may get Mental Erasure, which can heal her, though it's a gamble, as you don't know what cards you're getting from the dark side deck. At least, usually. so Visionary is going to struggle to stay alive, especially if the game goes on longer. This episode is going a little long, so I think I'll go through the variants quickly. Base Visionary in Definitive Edition has the same effect as Base Visionary in Enhanced. One hero draws 2 cards and discards 1, but Definitive Editions has it where if Viz did this effect on herself, then a dark side card is played. First Appearance Visionary has her draw a card and then either deal a card 1 damage or play a card from her dark side deck. So basically either going for minimal but safe option or going for the dangerous option. Dark Visionary in Enhanced Edition had that power to peek at the top 2 cards of a deck and replace one and bury the other. I considered that one a little overpowered at the time. Definitive Dark Visionary does something new. First, she forces herself to discard 2 cards, but then she will draw 3 cards from the dark side deck, essentially giving you the option to play them like normal cards, allowing you to control the chaos a bit. The power even lets you play one of the dark side cards if you want. The last variant I think I will let you guys be surprised by. Suffice it to say, it is pretty amusing. I do hope to see a Visionary Unleashed gets a variant, as that was a fun one in Enhanced, but we will see. I think this DE version goes a long way towards breathing new life into this hero, bringing more of her lore and stories into the deck and the feel of a person slowly losing control of herself, giving herself over to her dark thoughts. I will say I don't think the dark side deck goes quite far enough on the negative consequences, as most of the time, as they currently are, they still mostly seem to be net positives. Whereas I want to see them as more net negatives, but that's just me. I do look forward to going just a little crazy with this one. As for now, I think I will sign off. Take care, friends. But again, DE's use of Discover effects does mitigate the effectiveness of deck manipulation. So if you're dealing with a solo vision... one might think that she is a solo vision. Anyway,